a religious follower of my strategy of buy low, sell high. And I sort of assumed that like prices could come down a lot still, prices could go up. I don't know. But I have started like slowly accumulating the assets that I want for this cycle. About 2 weeks ago, I started. Yeah, we're here. How long has it
Okay.
been? It's been a
I don't know,
month.
man. I think about a month, maybe a little bit longer, maybe 6 weeks.
I think it's even more than that.
Actually, let me check. Everything's
Thankfully, in the
fine.
meantime, like nothing has happened in the world, so like we really haven't had any reason.
Yeah, I mean, there was really nothing to comment on, right?
And
I hope everybody's having a really relaxed time, considering there's nothing happening in the world right now.
Yeah, and now we'll come in with some zingers. We'll publish them many weeks late after they're no longer timely. And
it was actually 2 months ago that we last published something. Yeah.
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah, look, it's not that we're lazy on editing this. Is basically a legal safeguard. That way, if any financial advice happens to slip through unedited, then by the time that this is out, it will no longer be actionable, and you cannot blame us.
Right. Okay. So where should we start? I would suggest we just like overall discuss the crypto markets quickly. I think there's like, I don't know if we have any kind of like thesis on the current markets, but we've certainly sort of transitioned into like a new phase, I think, since we last spoke. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on where we are with markets.
Oh, let's talk.
I don't know. Well, you go ahead and tell us.
Well, it depends on what you mean by new phase. I mean, when we last spoke was a couple months ago. Let me check where Bitcoin was at the time. By the way, it is now March 23rd that we're recording this. So when we last spoke, let's say it was early mid-January, well, Bitcoin was in the mid-90s, and it has since then gone to shit, pretty much. Now, the reason why I don't say necessarily it's a different phase is because it's kind of behaving like you would expect. In the sense that the Bitcoiners have been going on and on and on about inflation hedge for years, and this still does not act as an inflation hedge, and still behaves as risk asset, right? Like even right now, we just saw Bitcoin and Sol spike while oil crashed on Trump posting that he was actually in talks with Iran, even though Iran was saying a couple of days ago that he can't be trusted at all. So basically, what I was describing as my kids are long BTC and short oil post. So I wouldn't necessarily say this is a different phase. If you want to do technical analysis, as we discussed a bit after our last call, I mentioned that I didn't even know what to expect around here, that the ideal case you could have expected form was a base forming around low 60s, basically, which was the highest weekly close of 2021. And then for it to start inching higher on the daily while still being in a relatively compressed range. That is what it's doing in for intents and purposes. So it went up a little bit higher than I thought. It went up to 73 instead of 69K or something. But again, this to me all looks, at the very least on the Bitcoin side, it all looks like expected behavior. So what do you mean then?
Okay. Like, what is it? Buy, hold, or sell?
Yes, definitely. By the time that you hear
talking
this,
about ranges and inching higher, lower, like it's
a new
is it going
market,
up 100x or is it not?
Yes, it is. It is by tomorrow at 6 a.m., but I'm not going to tell you the time. So,
okay, but in all seriousness, where do you sit on the buy, hold, sell spectrum?
Myself, this is a no decision point area for me, basically. If you were to have taken a Hail Mary, try to knife catch thing, that would have been the low 60s. This meaning the last few weeks, particularly since Iran came in, has demonstrated that this is 100% news-driven market. I would say that the only people actually able to trade this on anything longer than a, I don't know, 4-hour cycle or something are the inner circle who knows exactly what this guy's going to publish. So I would not basically be placing any bets around here until we have seen either a proper decoupling, which we haven't seen, or we have seen basically the things stabilize even against negative news. Again, the fact that this thing hasn't created to 30 could be generally taken as positive. But again, this is extremely very news driven, and the world is way too fucking random right now.
Okay.
I'll take the positive side. I'll take the buy side here for the first. I think this is kind of first time I would commit to proper buy side since kind of in a while. And I'm kind of willing to, it's always tough to call bottom, but I'm kind of willing to take a stab at a potential like kind of bottom-ish area. Typically the way these things work has been that you get a lot of time to buy the bottom, which I guess like here we're already kind of closing in on the end of month 2. If you kind of look at February 3 or February 2 was the time we crashed into the 60s for the first time. And just kind of as a heuristic, I think a couple of traders who I know who maybe have checked out a little bit from crypto, but are kind of like simple 4-year cyclical people who actually sold the top. So I can give them that kind of benefit. 2 of those just gave me like a message where it's like, hey, I'm thinking of buying, and what do I buy? I'm buying with about 25% right now of what my plan is. And kind of, I suppose the rest of the 75 is dollar cost averaged in throughout the year for what they intend for their position sizes to be. So like the kind of, I think it's kind of very constructive in the sense that previous all-time high weekly, support building around there. Outperformance during the events in Iran, like quite significant outperformance relative to trend markets is notable. So like, I think this is, if it's anything like past history has been, this is actually like kind of the time zone, an area where you start to expect bottom-ish to occur at least. And I'd say like that kind of, if you time the selling the cycle correctly last time, that 25% buy like just seems very reasonable to me at this time. So I'm going to be constructive here, and kind of first time I'll go to limb and be like, hey, a year from now you'll be pretty happy you bought here.
Okay, that I'll agree with, but I will definitely underline that if you time the sell side correctly last year, and that case I definitely agree. You're significantly ahead of this, and a small risk doesn't matter as much. Again, why I wouldn't call a bottom, we can see a clear base forming even on the weekly between say 65k and 69k, even when it has come back down hard, like it came from 73, it has ended up in that range, and it hasn't formed the lower low on the weekly. So all those things are positive. It's just, again, the fact that even today it moved violently up on completely unsustained news based on the post of a single individual who has contradicted himself about the situation in 3 times in the space of 15 minutes sometimes. It definitely seems like a tough spot at which to recommend to people generally that they should be making a move.
Yeah, I don't really care about like the up moves necessarily. What I'm looking at is how badly does the price react to bad news? And that's kind of where this whole situation in BTC, I think being up during the events in Iran, like, that to me screams the kind of classic things stop going up when there's good news and price doesn't go up, and things stop going down when price stops going down when there's bad news. And that to me like fills some light version of that criteria at least, which then makes sense. And like when I'm saying I'm going to the bottom, I'm saying like more like in the cyclical way of like, should one start deploying now? Then I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, in the 1 to 3 years from now kind of view, then sure.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that I think this is like partly a timing mismatch. Like if you're looking to make money this year, I don't know how to like do that.
Yes.
and I don't try to do that. I'm going to take Miko's side a little bit here. I'm a religious follower of my strategy of buy low, sell high. And I sort of assume that like prices could come down a lot still, prices could go up, I don't know. But I have started like slowly accumulating the assets that I want for this cycle. About 2 weeks ago, I started, and it's really slow. I'm not like taking really any risk in terms of sizing, but I am starting to feel like there's this moment in every kind of downward cycle where it feels like everyone's so negative that like I just want to be positive. um, and then the other way around, right? Like when everyone is like, "Oh, it's going to the moon," I start getting a little itchy. I'm like, I don't know. Like mostly people are wrong. So I don't know, but I do feel like there's like probably if the cycle continues, and I think there's a valid question of whether it does in the same way. But at least this past market, like it wasn't. There were some differences, but then ultimately it wasn't like that different in terms of its overall shape. And so for now, I don't really have much reason to think that the cycle isn't going to continue in some way, shape, or form. Probably returns are going to continue to get compressed, and that's fine. But then I'm looking at like public stock markets, and I'm like, well, crypto returns can compress a lot before, like they're like where I need to start really thinking of like, does it even make sense for me to allocate anything into it? And so I'm assuming that like maybe I'll accumulate over sort of like a period of 2 years. I'll just follow the price action, see what happens. If prices jump up a lot higher, I'll probably stop. If prices go down, I'll maybe increase. I don't know, like that kind of.
I definitely agree with that. I definitely agree that on the multi-year view, this doesn't look bad at all. I mean, consistent, particularly considering that we have been going up on average in the last 4 weeks with this clusterfuck. What I'm curious about is what you said, that the crypto market was in a different situation earlier. Then what do you mean? Because again, to me, basically what we're discussing is this is business as usual. It is the cycle. Everything
It's
is
just a different phase.
I think that would just meant that it stopped. Like we had the crash down, which essentially ended at the beginning of February, and we're sideways for 2 months, which is
a different phase. Yeah, it's a different phase of the cycle. As far as I'm concerned, the cycle remains the same, but like we're progressing in its cyclicality.
Yeah, in that sense, I would
my
agree.
strategy of buy low, sell high requires me to decide if we're now in the high or the low spot.
Yes,
or nearby.
No, sure. That I agree with. The thing is, the way that you mentioned it, the way that you said it originally made me think more of the the market has changed, things are behaving differently. Not the point, not things are behaving the same, but the point at which we are in the cycle has changed. So I would agree with the second
different phase, yeah.
There definitely will be if there was a lot of compression of returns in the last cycle, and you really had to be better than you had to be before to make money. That theme probably still continues in a very similar fashion. So that's both the same and different. I think the same is the kind of big ebbs and flows, and the difference is the skill level kind of increases each round here.
Can I counter that slightly? Like it's not really, but like a little bit. So I think the last cycle kind of like changed the dynamic of like you can't just be invested in anything. Like it, and you can call that a skill issue. It could also be like an analysis issue where like that just had been the case before. And then if you imagine the market goes towards like it's much more revenue driven, it's sort of traditional growth driven, looks more like the stock market in terms of analysis. Yes, it maybe becomes more skill issue, but it's not like that difficult either. It's just different.
Yes, that's a good point.
You're like
The
instead
bar in crypto has been very low, and I think to an extent, when we're talking about like revenue generating and kind of real users, businesses, in some sense, I think those will be quite easy to identify. It can I think what it does is it takes like heuristics that crypto traders have used before, which is like, oh, the catch-up trade, where my lending
the
protocol,
cascade.
that lending protocol, versus you should be just hitting the winners, and that's probably what it'll change. I think there's an argument to be made that like since the last cycle was so poor on kind of alt market, that even though you have this kind of compression of returns still happening, that the good part of that alt market will actually feel a little bit better next time. I think that's not an unreasonable take here as well.
So timing that is difficult, but I agree that's going to happen, right? Like investors are going to start pricing alts properly at some point. Clearly in this past cycle they didn't do that. It could be that in the next cycle they also don't do that. I don't know. But at some point they do start pricing them properly. And then I do think like hyperliquid sort of leading the way with buybacks. Like I do think the buyback stuff like is going to set a lot of projects apart. Like I'm not sure that like in some ways I think there's a convergence where like you have like buyback programs which start separating you from the pack based on kind of your real returns or your real business generation capabilities, and that sort of pushes the investors to start pricing you accurately as well, because they sort of notice you, they realize there's alpha and so on. And so like you would imagine that you kind of have the buybacks, which create a little bit of separation between crap projects and good projects. And then you have investors sort of like take that separation to the extreme because the multiples are like kind of out of whack. Like even though they're trading differently already, like you still have projects trading at multiples which just don't really make sense, considering that other projects with much worse economics are trading, in sort of a similar range. And so I think you'll start to have that behavior a little bit, but I don't know when. Like, I think it's going to be a slow kind of crawl through CoinMarketCap.
And by the way,
well, if you look at the next few years, that process, I think, will kind of not happen in an obvious way, but kind of happen slowly under the hood, where if you take like 12-month snapshots, you'll feel like the market shifts in those 12 months kind of more towards valuing correctly things. In each individual day, you probably don't really feel it, but you kind of just, but in 12-month snapshots, you probably be like, oh yeah, it's actually moved a little bit there. And I think that's kind of my base case of what I expect for the next couple of years.
Yeah, but just to go back to sort of clarify my point on like not necessarily that much harder, I feel like a lot of prior crypto investing was sort of like trying to predict memetics. And if that just moves into more like fundamental economics, especially in the age of AI, like I don't know if that's like fundamentally so much harder necessarily. It's just a switching of framework. And then maybe the sort of outlier returns are actually things that are like outside of that established framework. And those are the ones that are like really hard to catch because you kind of don't know how the framework will adapt in the future to accommodate something new. But yeah, I think it's an interesting time. I also think it's like, I don't know if you guys have felt this, but I do feel like I notice in myself kind of like this feeling, which is driven probably a large part by crypto Twitter and things like that. This kind of like, maybe crypto won't make it. And whenever I feel that, I'm like, oh, that's probably a sign to buy.
I'm not crypto. I'm not in crypto Twitter anymore, so I don't get that vibe. Luckily, I'm entirely unbiased because the I'm mostly on Blue Sky, and by and large, the people on my feed who talk crypto is only to kind of like try to elbow it in the teeth, which you just know what they're going to say, right? So it's not that you assume that they're actually looking deeply into the space, which might be a mistake that one could do if one is taking that crypto Twitter fire hose to a point. Having said that, I do stand by pretty much everything I said and we agreed on the last call 2 months ago, which is that I do think the projects that are going to survive is going to change significantly. And some of this is going to be fundamentals, but not all of this is just going to be on-chain stuff. Some of the fundamentals are going to be things that surprise you, like partnerships and business development that you don't get to see on-chain unless, and it only shows up until it gets assigned, right? On that sense, I do think that the relevant surviving crypto projects are going to move closer to the behavior of traditional public companies that only announce results like once a quarter and such.
You can see this effect, I think, easily if you look at some of the lending market charts, which is just consolidation chart, over time, slow consolidation into the winners. Kind of very, very straightforward. Perhaps in crypto, the idea space has been mapped out pretty well, especially for finance, and that being the kind of main use case here. So the go-to-market and kind of user acquisition. And there's a lot more stuff you see from projects who are surviving about trying to better control their distribution, but trying to find new distribution mechanisms. Everything from kind of mobile apps to kind of how the product suite is changing and things like that. So, and you see there's been a lot of shutdowns again in kind of last couple of weeks. Tally, for example, the big governance platform, is shutting down. So like a lot of consolidation and a lot of things that are kind of expected in a way where you always do some of these things, never had a business model. You always knew some of like the arguments for some of these businesses were quite weak. So this is kind of natural calling of the herd but if crypto doesn't die, like the winners from here will be in pretty nice spots, big businesses.
Yeah, I think there is sort of like all these moments in crypto always kind of lead to less competition. They create new equilibriums in terms of like pricing. Like looking at sort of like crypto businesses, like what always happens is in the bull markets, you get like huge amounts of competition. You have big funding rounds, salaries go up across the board, all these sort of like systemic reasons that make the actual market structure kind of pretty messed up. They make everyone's cost structure like pretty unfeasible. And then when those dynamics change, you get a lot of weird things. Just to go in a slightly different direction, I have a prediction. I think so right now, a lot of these like infrastructure providers for networks, we're talking like oracles, chain analysis type things, multi-sigs, all that stuff. Their business model right now is to charge the L1 and then charge the end user. I think that is going to die. Like that's going to go away. That sort of is like just one example of a dynamic that has occurred because L1s have or networks in general has been such a competitive space. They've had so much money. They've kind of like just wanted to get all the infrastructure. And so this has created the opportunity for them to play favorites and receive compensation, sort of additional compensation for providing those services. But realistically, it makes no sense for some network foundation to incur the cost structure of all the dependencies of its applications, while those companies also charge the applications or the end users for the services. And so that's the type of thing that I think is like going to go away. I think also that I think the salary discrepancy between sort of traditional world engineering and crypto is going to continue to sort of head towards convergence. I think crypto salaries are way down. It might be like the real estate market where nobody is admitting it yet, but I think they're way down. And you just have like, you have these moments, you have people leave the industry and then you kind of like normalize at some place and so on. But I think there's a lot of these dynamics which haven't like played out yet, which will probably play out in like the next year or something. But a lot of these also mean that it's like kind of an optimal time to do something because you have a lot of talent available at relatively reasonable prices. A lot of service providers are much more flexible in how they're like willing to structure deals because they're not getting these like amazing deals every day. Everything is like more negotiable in these moments, while in a bull market or like even in like an up market, nothing is negotiable. And so it's sort of the best time to start doing stuff because you have you can build like the lowest cost structure that's possible to deliver some service.
Okay, I'm curious. That's related to this, and I hadn't even thought about asking until you brought it up. But at some point in the past, we had discussed that the type of developer that could work from the outside of the industry and still be good at crypto, right? Like who you hire from. And this must have been years ago, but I recall that you mentioned that one area of success was, say, people who were doing embedded systems development and this kind of thing. So people with a very strict mindset and whatnot. Now, that may not have changed, but the thing is, we're currently in a situation on the software market as a whole where large enterprises are vomiting vast amounts of the developer workforce into the marketplace, right? I mean, Meta was like what, 20? They said at least 20% of the workforce. If you had to guess, would you take a bet on these people trying to stay on the trad web kind of thing, or you guess that some of them are going to, take a shot at getting hired in crypto, thus prolonging the potentially low salaries in the crypto side because there's a lot more availability?
My experience recently has been that crypto is not like it's no longer the case that you have to like get someone to make the jump into crypto. I don't know if that makes sense. Like it used to be the case that you needed to find like a particular person from the traditional side who was like, yeah, distributed systems are cool, let's do it. And like that was it, right? Like most normal people, engineers you talk to, they're like, it's a scam, it's stupid technology, like there was this whole sort of like convincing cycle that you needed to do. And my experience is that's not really the case anymore. This could be because I sit in like a place where I don't get exposed to the bad stuff. I'm sure it still gets a bad rap in many circles, but
the answer would be yes. It's likely that a percentage of people will try to play to crypto jobs.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is I think the developer pool is getting consolidated. Like it's just a tech pool largely. Yep. Of course, there are like industry specific things that you need to kind of understand. But yeah, it's much more like nuanced now than it used to be. The other thing is that I think like there's certainly infrastructure stuff still to be built. And I think that like probably the largest segment of that is going to be all the enterprise stuff. Like whatever stuff, retail users need, enterprises need 40 times more random bullshit. Like it's so there's a lot of stuff to be built, but it's not like embedded system stuff. I suspect a lot of it is actually going to be smart contract level stuff. Like there's the sort of like if we think of infrastructure as like the networks themselves, whatever consensus mechanisms, blah blah blah. I think it's like fairly well understood. There's like a lot of drop-in replacements. If you're actually building a brand new L1 from scratch that's like custom, yeah, you need some like specialized people, but like almost no one is doing that. And it's not even, I guess someone like Tempo is probably doing something like that. But a lot of folks are just taking like existing solutions and running the same thing. So most of the work I think is going to be more on the application level now. That's not to say that like the infrastructure level retains this sort of position where it's just super important to get it right. And that will always drive like a need for a certain kind of expertise. But I'm saying that like that in relative terms, like there's going to be a lot more sort of like integration work into banks systems than there is going to be L1 development is kind of
Yes.
what I mean.
Yeah, I am violently agreeing over here.
And that's a different engineer, by the way. I just saw a project which I can't say much about, but I can say that it was a full Java stack. And yeah. So
I am violently agreeing over here. I suspect that, and this does tie into what I said, that I still stand by what we said on the last call about this is gonna become a lot more like enterprise software using crypto rails. And I suspect that the way that what's gonna grow in the work pool over the next 3 years is not going to be the smart contract developers even, but the software reliability engineers, right? Like this kind of people.
Yeah. Integrations. I think if I was an engineer trying to get into crypto, like being a Java engineer might actually be the best thing because crypto basically has no Java engineers. Everything is either Rust or Go. So, but that like every enterprise, anything, they're gonna want Java. So then, I think that's actually not a bad way to go about it.
Maybe a sideways point, but maybe crypto now becomes kind of very positive in terms of an industry on, it's like a lot of this kind of where it's easy to migrate to as a software developer in some sense to maintain this kind of banking infrastructure. And like it flips, it already I think is kind of on its way to flipping in terms of like the kind of I don't know, Luddite society in a way, but most of society as well in AI, where I think the AI kind of negativity is going to increase significantly from here. Number one, just like its impact on pricing of other products. Then, like if you just go on YouTube, you'll see a lot of videos just start off when they're animated that this video does not use AI as a point of like pride, essentially, right? And like if you ever run into a situation where you actually create a proper bubble around this stuff, I don't mean this bubble that quote unquote people talk about all the time, even, but like a real ass once in a generation type of thing, or once in a multi-generation type of thing. Like the kind of negativity and backlash towards that is on its way to becoming so much more than whatever crypto is. We're becoming the industry of non-scammers on a relative.
Well, like, yeah, it's interesting because like what is kind of becoming more important with the AI boom is like trust and verifiability, which is basically like mostly what crypto espouses. And then weirdly, like AI is going to take a lot of jobs and crypto doesn't really take jobs. Like, I don't know if that's like a criticism of crypto or like what it is, but like crypto just doesn't have, especially now that crypto has become so much more tame and is like much more embedded into the traditional financial system. Like it just doesn't really like have that many negative side effects. I think there's like clear arguments for why there still are negative side effects. By the way, I live in a there's like the crypto bubble. I live in a very small part of that crypto bubble where people are trying to build real things, and like then there's this other side which is like, you know, OnlyFans models promoting meme coins, which I have no exposure to. Um,
But I
but
feel
I
like Spike is going to eat
No,
that
but
a lot better than it's going to eat like 3% of the labor force being replaced this month. You know, like
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Like
and
it's interesting that crypto is not actually taking jobs. Like it's just not.
to bring some anecdotal data points actually from the blue sky side of things that I mentioned earlier. Yeah, they just want to kick crypto in the teeth, but by and large, it's not, probably because there are no shills per se coming on to blue sky, or if there are shills, they quickly do block lists. It's not about the meme coins or anything. The aspect of crypto that people do end up shit talking a lot, and I see why basically. And these people probably don't even realize how little crypto there is to this. Are the prediction markets? That is kind of like the thing that people are coming down on. No, it's not actually, because they're seeing this now, first of all, as something that fucks with people's thinking. So, for instance, there was a story about an Israeli reporter who was the first one to report of I'm not even going to try to describe it exactly, but let's say solid object launched by Iran, solid object related to an Iran launch crashing somewhere in Israel. And I'll tell you why I'm not even just trying to describe it in more specific terms. And there was a particular, and he described it, I don't remember, I think as a missile from Iran that had impacted it, or maybe the other way around. Anyway, he starts getting messages from random people, then starts getting death threats and stuff, and starts trying to backtrack the thing. And people originally were trying to him to get to change the wording from a missile had hit to debris from a successful interception has hit, if I recall correctly. And people start the guy starts getting death threats and messages and calls to his house and information about his family and whatnot, because his people are trying to change the wording, because now his reportage is being used as one of the deciding factors on this bet that people have money riding on. So this is like a very visible negative social influence to these things, which is why I think this is why people are kind of like seeing it as a lightning rod in the same way that they used to do the rock calls. So that's thing one. And thing is what we did mention a couple calls back, that there is a very obvious pattern of corruption on Trump's inner circle of like large first-time accounts betting on a thing that the U.S. government is going to do like 3-4 hours before that thing takes place. So they have been a very visible focus for corruption and for generally terrible human behavior for people as a whole.
Sure. Okay. Like
you also see a lot of this actually on the sports kind of subreddits or like sports communities. So like you just see this essentially every day, that's complaining about like Polymarket and Kalshi on like NBA forums, for example. And there's a couple of like high profile cases which have to do with insider trading there. And then there's just this kind of broader, I think, sentiment about this is corrosive to society and yada yada, sort of stuff that I would think mirrors a lot of the 90s poker boom type of thing of like an addiction. So I think you have a mix of those things mixed in with the fact that it's crypto, so you kind of get to start from a place of low expectations there. So that is I would say like the worst area. I think that is going to be dwarfed massively by like, I don't know, people like all the kind of like, it's the kind of same thing as like Bitcoin mining water usage or whatever. The AI version of that is just 100 times more salient to people. Whether it's like it really no sensibility, it's just like this stuff that like it's just gonna feel worse to people. So I can kill. Okay.
it's really funny to me that AI uses so much power that actually Bitcoin seems fairly efficient in comparison.
I think the damage caused by the perceived damage caused by AI into various parts of the world, where the opposite effect will probably be true of people's lives being improved a lot. But it just this process that we're going to go through over the next 10 years will be just the most negative ever, and crypto is going to look pretty great next to that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, crypto is going to be used by all the banks, and like I mean, crypto is going to disappear from the public eye. Essentially, it's not so much that like crypto is going to look so good. It's just that the concept of crypto will be just embedded in the financial system, and no one will really even pay attention.
Maybe one exception that could be interesting to talk about is because everything else is going to be, but BTC is still interesting in terms of it maintaining this kind of weird status as a new thing, and whether or not the reputation of that thing actually turned really positive in the world for I don't know what reason, but yeah, I mean it has a lot, right, over the past lot of years. I think like now if people are like, oh, I missed the boat, it should have been so obvious. They're not actually pissed off at the asset anymore in the way that they used to be, apart from, an economist here, mediocre economist here or there, but like I guess the average.
Yeah. BTC positioning is interesting because so like I was talking about this with someone, I don't remember who exactly, the other day, but it's sort of like it's like a very resilient thing to be like an asset, right? Like it sort of doesn't matter that much. Nothing else really matters. Like it's just an asset. On the other hand, I think from a growth perspective, like that positioning actually caps you. So like you're just not like, if you're digital gold, you're like, you can only ever be gold in essence, right? Like you don't have much ability to like morph beyond that in any way. It just is what it is. It's not like everyone is going to want to hold suddenly all of their wealth in gold. Like if they're not doing it now, they're not going to do it then. And so I have a lot of, I'm a fairly big believer in Bitcoin's staying power, which I have changed my mind on a little bit after people stopped freaking out about the energy usage stuff. I mean, that could still make a comeback. Who knows? But now we have like Bill Gates saying climate change isn't real. So who knows where we're going to be in 5 years? But the asset thing, like I'm not sure it's actually good in some kind of like really general sense. Like, would you rather be the financial system or an asset in it? Is kind of like the way to think about it, I think. And I'm not saying that we have achieved being the financial system, but that's sort of the direction we're going in, and that's much less investable and blah blah blah. But gold is capped.
And you can say that like the universe of the valuation of productive assets in this world is much higher than non-productive ones. That's essentially like, I think, the insight kind of here, and you would expect that insight to hold. So in that sense, that's a super kind of bullish argument, which is that if you make it through the economy in a meaningful way, that's a multi-trillion opportunity, and that multi-trillion opportunity is at minimum on par with the BTC opportunity. But in very, very positive cases, it is so much more, like order of magnitude more.
Quite frankly, I generally agree with you. I mean, I think BTC is capped by other reasons as well. Generally agree with you. I think the discussion is mostly academic. I don't think if you were starting a project right now, I don't think anybody gets any more the choice of, I'm just going to be an asset. That on the digital side, that spot is taken. If being an asset is good or not is relevant, you're not going to get to compete with this thing on asset terms anymore. So right now, you got to do something useful for people and try to carve out a productive, or at the very least, fun niche somewhere, right? You're going to need to do something for somebody other than exist.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and like this maybe sounded like a little bit of a criticism of Bitcoin's positioning, but at the same time, like being an asset is like, it's really convenient in terms of your staying power. You just get this sort of default allocation in portfolios that just like keeps you in a certain position. So it's called good and bad. I just see it as like kind of like looking at where technology is going. Like, I don't know. I mean, I have some views on where we're going overall, but like, I think there's going to be such large changes that there's just going to be like much bigger things than BTC, you know, like, and maybe not, who knows, maybe it's not crypto related, maybe it is, I don't know, but like, but being an asset amongst, you know, hundreds of thousands of assets is sort of like, you know, at some point in the future, it could look a little bit weird.
So basically what you're saying is there is going to be a flipping at some point. But also, by the way, one of the reasons
what, right? Like, it's,
I mean, if you think there's sort of going to think it's going to be, there are going to be other things that are larger than Bitcoin, then that means that one of the smaller things now, maybe a thing that doesn't exist, is going to end up having a total larger market cap. That is what being bigger means. And that's the flipping that people talk about.
so, yeah, we don't need to go too deep into this, but like, look, it's like flipping, it comes from this idea that there's going to be a token on CoinMarketCap which flips
Bitcoin.
right? And this is like, it's possible, but like, it's also possible that the like actual big change is just very fragmented in terms of its value capture, and like, you know,
There's no single company that has the market cap of gold. But the US stock market is a lot larger.
yeah. So like, it's maybe like, it's this is kind of arguing against my own point, but like, it is possible that Bitcoin is just the largest token because it so happens that like the rest of the market is more fragmented, or you know, whatever, but at the same time, like, the opportunity is sort of much larger in that in the rest of the market than it is in Bitcoin. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, it's an interesting time. I think this is a good segue into what you guys think about the Ethereum Foundation. Did you read the Ethereum Foundation mandate? How excited are you for an Ethereum that doesn't care about what its users want to do?
I'm extremely excited about people that understand leadership of the users.
I'm not so negative about this. I mean, it's not great that the market cap is so high historically and now to kind of push this stuff in this way. But like, you know, at least if someone in this world has a vision of doing things their way, and you know, go ahead, I think. And I almost I have a larger distaste for an in between, you know, and the kind of design decisions that are halfway. I think you kind of fully commit to who you are and go with that. And you know, I'm positive on this. Not of wrong. Just I like it. Like I personally.
So you sort of, you enjoy it on a philosophical level. Will you buy ETH?
No, of course not. But you understand my part.
Yes. I would agree with
that.
I would agree with that framing. At the very least, they picked a lane. It is not a lane I would have pegged. It is not a lane that I think benefits the platform in pretty much any way. It's a lane that is going to ensure that Ethereum continues in the way that we have been going, that we have been kicking it on the teeth for the past year and a half or 2 years, of course. So this is not, and this is not going to be like, oh, Ethereum is that kind of thing overnight, right? Anything that is large enough at most is going to end up decaying gradually and getting eroded, which is, and some things do have same power. Ethereum is going to be around probably forever. But, you know, just the post that Tankrat Feist put out, that was kind of astonishing, right? And I was showing it to a friend and who is not nearly as deep in the crypto space. And I had to explain to him who Dankright Weiss was. I was like, this is kind of like the Pope getting elected and saying like, yeah, just people, Catholicism really isn't working. This whole thing is bullshit. We should just dismantle this thing, right? Or I'm gonna go over there. There's more fun on that or a religion. That was pretty freaking astounding. And of course, I'm sure Ethereum loyalists are gonna say that now is because he has a financial interest in Temple, but still, it's none of the things that he wrote about were wrong. And again, they picked the lane. It's not a lane that's gonna help them, I think. But hey, good luck and fun, people.
I think the best way to think about this is that Ethereum or the Ethereum Foundation is going to continue on their path to making it maximally decentralized and like not for DeFi and not for meme coins and not for this and that, and be some kind of like dystopian world reserve. While
what the fuck are you?
While the Ethereum chain continues to make the vast majority of its money from DeFi and from these activities that they are not supporting.
If you mean the Ethereum chain, I'm not sure. I mean, that thing is going to end up moving. Like at some point, what the fuck does Coinbase needs Ethereum? Right now is paying lip service to centralization, but at the point that if you end up having the major, I don't know, suppose that Coinbase were to partner with Visa and MasterCard to move money, for instance, like what the fuck do you need Ethereum, right? You already have organizational buying, organizational trust. People who are moving money that way are not really going to care if your blocks are going to end up getting signed on the Ethereum chain or what. So I'm not really sure that that's going to be the case. That is definitely likely to be the case in the short term. But I suspect that anything that does build on Ethereum that gets large enough, it's going to get large enough because they do the business development that the Ethereum Foundation doesn't care about. And eventually they're going to figure out that as margins compress, there's zero value on them paying down to the chain.
Maybe the reason I'm unabashedly so excited about this is that
your Solana position.
No, but just like it accelerates, I think, the path that we're already on, and we don't have to pretend, or there's fewer people left in the world who will kind of pretend that this is a viable route, and so like even if the foundation doesn't want these products to be successful on top, essentially, that's how I read it. And I don't think that's a mischaracterization of what has been said. I think it just moves us further. We're quicker into our natural state that we've already been on. I don't find anything negative about this. This is only positive.
So basically, your Solana bags is what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's what I said.
That's what I heard.
Well, no, actually, things that are ETH related and Ethereum dependent. I think this provides clarity for I don't know if you're an Aave holder or something and a lot of TVL is on ETH.
Yeah.
You know that the eventual roadmap somewhere will include something other than ETH as the execution layer, and that's fine.
I mean, it didn't make the general purpose on a position, but that is what I heard when I was saying. This provides clarity. Nobody's gonna deceive themselves, or nobody should from now on deceive themselves about what is likely to happen on Ethereum as a platform.
Yeah, and I mean, so I feel bad for a lot of the folks that have spent a lot of time kind of trying to mold Ethereum into something that's viable. You have the roll-up teams, you have a lot of the application teams and so on. It kind of sucks. They were if you think about the timeline here, Ethereum has pivoted its strategy about once every 2 years. Literally this came on the back of the past 2-ish years of Ethereum trying to essentially maneuver towards being friendly to application builders and DeFi and all this stuff, and then complete ramp. They completely threw the roll-ups under the bus, besides Base, because Base didn't need or like couldn't be thrown under a bus and stuff.
Sorry to interrupt there. One more thing. When I said I was unabashedly excited, I thought that was a bit much for me. I think that was a bit much. Unnecessarily large. And perhaps could have been done a bit more tastefully. I want to show where my exact position is, and my position is that wasn't much.
So basically what you're saying is that we need a real-time AI filter of like a Mika dehyperbolizer going on here.
When Mika says Ponzi, what does he mean? He means cleverly structured economics. Have you seen
Unabashedly excited. Well, you man.
Have you seen the LinkedIn Speak translator? If you haven't, it's great. It's great. It makes what there's some amazing ones that were posted on Twitter. Like I just made a huge poop, and then it translates into like this. It's very good at capturing what LinkedIn Speak is. Anyway, but I think this does like open the floodgates in some way. Like Ethereum putting this out, whether you think it's good or bad, does now like really clear the field. Like it's very up in the air who's gonna like if Ethereum had gone down this path hard, everyone would have had to fight Ethereum, and they just do have a lot of resources and they do have a lot of people and all this stuff. And now if they're out of the game, then like it's much less clear who's going to be kind of the winner. And as an anecdote from the enterprise world, by the way, these guys are using EVM. Like all of them. This is not like they're not out there like trying to figure out how to deploy on Solana. Nor, certainly nowhere else. Like right. And so like it, and you see all the enterprise chains, Tempo and these guys like all EVM. And so like I hate to say it, but we might be in for a golden age of EVM chains.
I mean, that's pretty much already the case, right? We had this conversation a while back when I was talking to an EVM focused team that shall remain unnamed. This was about a couple of years ago, maybe a year or something ago. And I was talking to one of their lead investors, and basically he asked me if I thought like EVM or Solana was going to win. So I thought like, yeah, if you ask me like 5 years from now, there's probably going to be more projects running on the EVM than in any other particular virtual machine, mostly because of how spread it is. Now, a lot of these are going to be clones and other stuff, but it seems like now that might not even be the case. It seems that basically EVM is going to end up being the Java of the crypto ecosystem at the point.
Yeah, well, there are many appropriate analogies with Java.
That's precisely why I meant it, because the first thing that people should be for those of you whose first encounter with software development was crypto, one of the key things was that for a while there, it seemed that Java platform was going to make some microsystems like the monster company, and Sun completely failed at capitalizing Java momentum and pretty much died and ended up getting acquired and shoved into a closet by Oracle, while Java, the platform, lives on. And that is very likely what is going to end up happening here, just at a much slower rate.
Yeah. So you do have this like it's fascinating that we still haven't gone beyond this point. We have like EVM, which is like fundamentally structured in a way that makes it difficult to like get real performance out of it, that makes it difficult to make very, very secure things. And then we have other things which are structured for that, but which just don't get the adoption. And so we're still living this weird dual timeline.
Okay, there's NPMs and there's CDMs.
Like we're kind of going through the adoption cycle again, in some sense.
With enterprise.
And that means that I think we'll run into, that means that there will become a day where we run into the limits of EVM, and then we start to build systems that are kind of more geared towards high frequency, and they'll take elements of the stuff that was built before, and it's kind of like nothing new under the sun again, and we just it's about
Yeah, I
when
agree.
it's deployed and like
I agree with this, and I think this is actually what I've been hearing from some of my like OG crypto friends is like they're just a bit bored because they see that coming, and I agree that's coming. Like it's almost like the inventing has been done. Now it's just kind of like deployment. And it's enterprises are gonna like go through the same cycle that like we've seen four cohorts of retail users go through and so on. I think it's kind of cool though, like that happening means that we're sort of entering a period where like it will actually be used. And yes, from an operational standpoint, we're gonna start like it's going to start looking more like banking software projects. Like there's going to be like PwC or Deloitte or like Accenture, like we're getting into that world. And
That's
and for someone who's like gotten their start building like anarcho-capitalist tech, like that's less exciting.
yeah. By the way, the EVM parallel I just realized is actually quite the EVM to Java parallel is probably quite on point because you mentioned that the fact that you mentioned that the EVM is not built for speed brought to mind the fact that there are quite a few. There's EVM and there's EVM, right? There are quite a few EVM-like things that are not fully EVM compatible. I forget what the name of the chain was now, but there was the one that basically their own compiler ended up adding account annotations to do a Solana-like thing.
There's a lot of those, especially on the ZK EVM side. They're not bytecode compatible mostly.
Exactly. So there's EVM and there's EVM, and that was the part that was on Java where you had like general application Java and you had like applet Java and you have embedded Java, and they all had like different requirements. Java as the general way of building applications was the thing that won. And
Yeah.
I do think
I
that's
mean,
what we're going to get
You
here.
do have a weird thing for a little while here where like Ethereum still leads in terms of like you still need to be compatible with mainnet Ethereum for most use cases, right? So if when Ethereum upgrades, like applications expect you to upgrade as well. And so you do have Ethereum kind of leading the way, but at some point that sort of necessarily must diverge because Ethereum just like becomes too unique, and its needs are no longer the needs of the other applications. And that's probably like on a technical level where we start to get like severe disconnection where like you just start having capital moving off because like literally the system is no longer serving the capital, and then other players who have EVM or are using EVM are sort of taking it in a different direction, which is more driven by those commercial interests. But I don't think that's going to happen very soon. Mostly because Ethereum is so slow to roll out anything dramatic. so then you wanna continue, and like you always get like you have something like account abstraction, and then you get some applications that build on Ethereum account abstraction, and then they want those same features to exist elsewhere. Anyway, so Ricardo, when are you going to buy Ethereum?
Well, you mean the foundation itself?
I mean, they just sold a whole bunch of ETH to Tom Lee.
Thank you. No, actually, I put it that way because I'm thinking, I mean, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, and the parallels might not be the same. But there are quite a few parallels we could establish here to the Sun microsystems thing, like the Sun's whole thing, and this is where it doesn't really jive with EVM and Java, but I'm just gonna put it out there, and then maybe we leave it at that. The Sun's whole thing was that what made him money, Java didn't make him money. By and large, they did have some licensing things, but Java didn't make him money. The thing that made him money was basically selling their big iron servers. And during the .com crash, the server market pivoted basically, or the software web market pivoted from like big expensive servers to commodity disposal hardware. Right, like what now in DevOps they call like the cattle not pets approach. You could just build and throw away. There are some parallels there on the fact that a lot of other chains, like Ethereum paints itself as the big, secure thing. And there are a lot of approaches where even like disposable sidechains or temporary sidechains could be an equivalent to the disposable 80 x86 service from back there. And the fact that the thing that keeps the Ethereum foundation going is effectively the fact that they're sitting on a whole bunch of Ether and that has an asset value, right? So if the thing that makes the money effectively, which is selling Ether at a top every so often, ends up not being feasible enough, that might end up being the proper parallel to Sun no longer being able to serve servers. I need to process this a little bit more now.
All right. Well, I think we'll leave it there. Obviously, this has been incredibly informative and well structured.
Yes. And if any of you is into putting a syndicate together to acquire the Ethereum Foundation, do reach out.
Indeed. Until next time, don't read the news. You're just going to feel bad. Have a good week.
Stay away from crypto Twitter when making purchase decisions, and don't listen to us because we have no idea what we're doing.
Oh, for sure. Never listen to us. Ta-ta.
Ta-ta.